Hey, what's up? Chris Seiter from Ex-Boyfriend Recovery. Today we're going to be talking about 5 things that you could be doing that are making your ex very angry and mad at you. Oh, yeah, also annoyed. Look, here's the thing. Before we get started, the first thing I recommend for everyone who's new to this process of trying to get your ex back to do is to actually stop by our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, and take the quiz that I have designed there that will actually tell you what kind of chance you have of getting your ex back. So taking the quiz is very easy. Simply look in the description below this YouTube video, click on the link that you see there. It's going to take you to a page that asks you quite a few questions about you, your ex, and the situation or your relationship together. And then based on how you answer those questions, we're going to run your answers through an algorithm that's going to spit out a score for you. We're also going to run your answers or take your answers and actually advise you what to do in your particular situation. So again, if you're interested in taking that quiz and figuring out what kind of chance you have of getting your ex back, before you start figuring out if you're making your ex mad or annoyed with you, simply look in the link below in the description of this YouTube video. All right, let's begin.
All right, today we're going to be talking about 5 things that you can actually do, say, or 5 ways you can act that will really make your ex mad. And these are the things that you want to avoid, especially if you're trying to get them back. Now, if you don't know how I kind of roll, everything that I talk about has been tested by either scientists or by me personally. So a lot of the behaviors that I'm going to be talking about today, I have seen personally, and I will tell you some stories of people who have engaged in them and what kind of results they have seen. So let's just hit the ground running. What are these 5 behaviors to really avoid? Well, the first one is permanently never talking to them again. Now I can hear kind of the shocked silence on the other end there, because oftentimes I'm a huge proponent of the no contact rule, which is where you're taking a period of time where you essentially ignore your ex, where you don't talk to them again. The thing to remember about the no contact rule is that it's not ghosting. Right? A lot of people think sometimes the no contact rule is about ghosting. You simply do not talk to your ex at all until they contact you, but that's not really how it works. You typically pick a time period anywhere between 21 to 45 days and you ignore your ex throughout that. But after that is done, it is time to contact them again. You cannot expect to get an ex back or even attempt to get an ex back without communicating with them in some way, shape, or form. So one thing that can really upset your ex is if you do not communicate with them after the no contact rule. If you just permanently ghost them and expect them to come back and beg for you back, it really doesn't work that way. So that's the first behavior that I've seen, albeit it's a little uncommon. One of the more rarer type of behaviors that I've seen people engage in. But the next one is something I see a lot of, and that's where you're trying to force things too much. Now, if you're familiar with any of my YouTube videos or any of the articles that I've written on my website, which, again, if you want to check out my website, simply look in the description of this YouTube video. There should be a link there. The one thing I'm always going on and on about is this idea that it really takes 2 things to make an ex want to get you back. The first thing is positioning. You need to position yourself in the right way. And the second thing is timing. Your ex has to be in a frame of mind where they're willing to take you back. And if any one of these 2 things are off, it can actually kill your chances. I'll give you an example. Let's say that you've done everything perfectly. You've positioned yourself, you've taken my advice, and you have not made any mistakes. But your ex just isn't in the frame of mind to date anyone. Well, no matter how well you did, you're probably not going to reconnect with your ex. On the other hand, let's say that you haven't done anything to improve your odds, to improve your position per se, but your ex is in a frame of mind where they're willing or wanting to date. Will they take you back? Probably not. It takes positioning and timing. And what I see sometimes happening is some people try to force things too much. They don't wait until the timing's proper. And the analogy I want to give you here is just imagine you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It never pays to force it, like this GIF right here. Instead, the smarter approach is to simply sort of bide your time and make sure that you understand the constraints of what you're trying to do. Now, on my website, I have very specific guides I've written. I've even written an entire book about the proper way to get your ex back. What needs to happen in this idea of a value chain. You need to have a value chain if you're going to be trying to get your ex, if you're going to be getting your ex back. So that's the second type of behavior I've seen men and women engage in that is going to make their ex mad. The third behavior is telling them you don't want to break up at all. Now, this is kind of an interesting behavior, because I think ultimately what happens here is, well, first let me say this. I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. So much so, in fact, the other day I was rewatching it. I'm like one of those super fans that will every once in a while just rewatch the whole series from start to finish. Anyways, I was watching an episode last night where there was a character, and if you're kind of big on spoilers, if you've always wanted to watch Game of Thrones but haven't given it a chance, make sure that you do not watch this, because I'm about to spoil a huge plot point here. Anyways, there's a scene in Game of Thrones where there's a character who is the master manipulator. His name is Littlefinger. He's a master manipulator to the point where he just kind of screws with everyone. And it's kind of entertaining to watch, and you kind of love to hate the guy, and you're always cheering against him. And I was watching the scene where he ended up getting tricked by a couple of other characters, and they literally sort of were going to execute him. And it's really interesting to watch his character go through the progression of sort of like accepting what's happened and trying to fight his way out of it, to the point where he's literally begging. He's on his knees and begging. In fact, I'm going to play a quick clip for you, kind of so you can actually see this in action.
I am Lord Protector of the Vale, and I command you to escort me safely back to the Eyrie.
I think not.
Sansa, I beg you. I loved your mother since the time I was a boy.
And yet you betrayed her.
I loved you more than anyone.
And yet you betrayed me.
Now, the reason I wanted to show you that is to show you that it didn't work. No matter how smooth-tongued or silver-tongued he was, no matter how much he begged, it didn't work. And I think exes kind of view you in this way when you're constantly telling them that you don't want to break up with them at all. Almost sort of like you saying, well, you know, you're saying that we can break up, but I don't agree with this decision. And I think it can kind of irk them and annoy them and get on their nerves if you do it time and time and time again. So try to avoid that behavior. Now, the fourth type of behavior is kind of an interesting one as well. It's not accepting their decision to end the relationship. It's closely related to what we just talked about with the sort of Littlefinger example. This one is all about accepting reality. Now, I think we can agree on 2 points here. The first one is that people who do not accept reality tend to be looked at by the general public as crazy. Your ex is no different. And the other point is other people who don't accept the reality are probably in the Matrix. I literally just put that clip in there for that little phrase. Anyway, here's my point. The more you say that you don't accept their decision to end the relationship, or the more you act in a way that sort of doesn't accept their decision to end the relationship, the more they look at you as an unstable entity. And unstable entities, there's nothing more unattractive than unstable entities. In fact, I'll give you a story from my own personal life. There was a girl one time, 7, 8, 9 years ago, when we were talking, and she was a very pretty girl, very pretty. The problem is, though, as I got to know her, I started to notice she had some sort of unstable qualities. Anytime I would say something in a joking manner that was just within the normal sense of humor, I didn't say anything controversial or anything like that, she took it personally and, in fact, would try to start arguments with me almost like we were dating when we weren't. We were just in that sort of like getting to know each other phase. And no matter how pretty she was, it completely turned me off on her. And I think exes kind of view their exes who don't accept the decision to end the relationship the same way. I don't think this one will necessarily make your ex mad. I think more than anything, it's going to annoy your ex. So let's move on to talk about the fifth and final thing that I'd like to cover here. And that's actually if you talk about your old relationship all of the time. And the first thing that always comes to mind here when I'm faced with people who tell me that they're doing this is I always think of that movie Fight Club. Have you ever seen Fight Club? Well, I'm not going to spoil anything here, but if there's a scene in Fight Club that is the most famous scene, right? I'm going to play it for you right now.
The Fight Club. The first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club.
So why did I play that scene for you? Well, it's the first thing that always pops into your mind, into my mind rather, when people talk about this scenario right here, where they're talking to their ex constantly about their old relationship. And I think sort of the interesting thing to consider here is that Fight Club kind of has it right. You know, the first rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. The second rule of Fight Club is you do not talk about Fight Club. Well, the first rule of ex recovery is you do not talk about your old relationship. The second rule of ex recovery is you do not talk about your old relationship. And I can understand the reason for why someone would want to talk about their old relationship. As human beings, we're wired for closure. We're wired to close loops. That's why open loops work on human beings, because we obsess until they're closed. And I often give the example of if you literally went to your front door, opened it up, and just left it open for an entire day or night, that would kind of irk you a little bit, right? You would not be able to stop thinking about it because it's an sort of interrupted task, or it's an open loop, if you will, and you start thinking about all the negative things that could happen. Well, human beings are kind of like that, especially when you're looking at your old relationship. You're looking for some type of closure, for an explanation for why. But asking why can be dangerous, especially when it's going to annoy your ex. I'm all for getting closure. I am. But if you're going to be trying to get your ex back, I think the timing of when you get that closure is essential. So two things need to happen. Either number one, you need to wait until you essentially have your ex invested so much into you that there's no way they would ever leave before you start asking questions about why they broke up with you. What's the real reason they broke up with you? Or the second thing that needs to happen is you need to simply accept the fact that you may never get an honest answer. And the sooner you can do that, the better.